What is going on, everyone? Chris with Journals, Comics, and Pop Culture. Today, we're going to be talking about the 5 biggest mistakes that collectors make when pricing comic books. Now, this could be for collectors or maybe folks that just, inherit a collection or somebody that doesn't know that much about comic books. But I've seen these mistakes happen all across the board in this hobby, in this industry, and we're going to dive in depth into this topic today. Before we get started, if you all aren't subscribed to the channel, please take some time to do so. Also, check out all the awesome links that are below, including how you can become a Patreon member of the channel for only $3.99 a month. And you can also become a YouTube Journals Comics member for only $1.99 a month by clicking that join button below. Both memberships do get you extra perks. Also, check out our Comic Book Canon YouTube channel. That link is below. We have our live shows every Friday night. If you aren't subscribed yet there, you guys are missing out. But let's get into the topic at hand. So, you got some comic books and you want to sell some comics and make money. We're just going to get right into these, starting off with my number 5 on the list of mistakes that folks make when trying to price comic books. That mistake is sources. My answer to what sources you utilize to find a fair market value for your comic books. Never use just one. I talk about this all the time. There are multiple sources out there for comic book value. Overstreet, probably one of the most popular one that has been around the longest, which is still a print book. Then you have more popular websites like Go Collect. Obviously, over the last few years, a really popular one is Key Collector app. Then you have Cover Price, which is, a newer one to the stage that's been doing some things. I use Cover Price. I use them all, quite honestly. So if you want to understand how to price comic books, you got to use multiple resources. The biggest one at play these days, most likely, is eBay sold listings, where you can go into eBay, say you want to find the value of a Uncanny X-Men annual number 14. Right? You can do the search engine for the book. And then if you click down on some of the settings, you can actually click sold items and it'll bring up all the books sold. Somebody posted in a Facebook forum just the other day. So is what everyone is basing their prices on is eBay sold these days? I guess eBay is controlling the market. And I was like, look, eBay doesn't control the market. What we want to pay for a book controls the market. And then we just look at what the sources say that they sold for. So that's why eBay sold is a very good source, because you could just see what people are willing to buy. But again, what I like to do is monitor each and every source. That way, I could kind of put that all together in a pot, kind of get a rough average of what a book is selling for on every platform. So don't ever just use one source. That is my best advice I could give you there. Let's go into number 4. Using graded books to price raw books. This is a huge issue that I see going on all over the place. Now, one way that this can happen relates back to issue number 5. What source do you use? For example, Go Collect uses graded books as their fair market values. So going back to number 4, don't price raw books as graded books. Some people might be going to Go Collect and thinking that those values are for raw books, but they're not. They're for graded books, and graded books command a higher value than the raw book. So this brings up another level of due diligence that you have to do on your own in order to find a proper price for a comic book. So again, a Star Wars High Republic number 4 right now most likely is still going only for $4 or $5, roughly cover price. It's a new book. If you get this graded in a 9.8 CGC slab and you go to you go to GoCollect.com and look up a fair market value, it might be $50 because a 9.8 slab sold for $50. That does not mean that this book is worth $50. You have to understand that. The graded book, depending on condition, depending on the grade of the book, but the slabbed graded book from CGC or CBCS or whatever grading company can command anywhere from a 50% price increase from the raw value up to 200 to 300 times of the value of the raw book. So that's why it's extremely important to make sure that you aren't using graded values to establish a value for a raw comic book. All right, let's go in to number 3. Thinking all comics have value. This is a huge misconception. So just because, let's see, I got plenty of books stacked up over here. So let's go and find something like this. Sugar and Spice, number 95. Okay, this is a 15 center. I believe this came out in 1971. So somebody that may have inherited a collection, and they don't really know much about comics, they look at this and are like, wow, that's a 15-cent book. It's old. It came out in 1971. It must be worth hundreds of dollars. So they go to sell it and they're like, look, I got these old, rare, vintage books. I'm asking $100 for this book. No, this book is probably more worth around maybe $5. You got to consider the condition. I mean, this is a decent, maybe a very good to find book. So again, it's not high grade. It's a nice mid-grade looking book. Again, I wouldn't pay more than $5 for this book. Just because it's a comic book does not mean that it has value. Very, very important. Again, I think people get confused with this, especially from age, and especially, look, we're in 2021. People might come across books from the 80s or even the early 90s and think that they're old and vintage, and they'll try to go to maybe Facebook Marketplace and sell, 5 image books from the early 90s, and they're asking $50 for them when they're like, what is his name? Shadowhawk number 5 or something, and they're like beat up. They're not even in mint condition. So you got to understand that all comic books don't have value. All right, now this kind of correlates right into the number 2 mistake, and that is the more books, the more value. This huge misconception. The more books you have, the more value you can get. This misconception, the fact of the matter is actually almost completely opposite. When you're trying to sell comic books, the more you have, the more you can lose in value. And you're thinking like, Chris, like, what are you talking about? That's absolutely nuts. Well, I'm going to tell you why. Collectors are the ones that pay fair market value for comic books. It's the ones that are in the hunt for that one key book, or maybe they're in the hunt for that one run of their of Spider-Man books because Spider-Man's their favorite character, right? So, if you got you came into a comic collection of, 300 books, for us collectors, 80% of what you have may be worth, we don't care about it. But you're going to have, oh, look, there's a collection of 300 books, stuff from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, vintage stuff, asking $600. Well, you can look at that and say, $2 a book, that's not too bad. But at the end of the day, the average collector, if they're spending $600, if they even have $600 to spend, they want to make sure they're spending it on what they're collecting and not just a random books to where you might have maybe 20 or 30 books out of that 300 that they really want. So in order to get value, you're going to have to maybe separate the books and figure out the value for each book and tend to the collector's needs. Because when you sell in bulk, you're not selling to the average collector anymore. You're selling in wholesale. You're selling in bulk. You're selling to dealers, right? You're selling to people that want to basically get their hands on a large amount of books so they can then take the time to price them out and sell them individually to collectors and make a profit off of. So this is why I always suggest that, or I use this statement when people ask, how much should I ask for these books? I came into a collection, right? The more time and effort that you put into pricing your books out, the more you're going to get for them. The more time and effort you put in, the more you're going to get. The less time and effort, the less money you're going to get. So you can actually go through every single one of those books, price them out, grade them, estimate a decent grade and a decent price per grade, price them out, list them on eBay or the Facebook Marketplace individually. Then there's kind of a middle ground. Well, maybe you don't want to take the time to price out 300 books individually, but maybe you want to separate them by maybe superhero. You get your Supermans over here, you get your Spider-Mans over there, your X-Men's over here, and then maybe you separate them by age. Maybe you separate your 12 and 15 centers or your 20 centers, and then maybe your more modern books. And maybe you can kind of gauge, the fact that you're willing to get rid of these modern books for almost like, I could get rid of those for a quarter each, right? I'm going to sell 100 of those I'm going to ask just like $50, and maybe if somebody offers me 40, I'll take it. But then you have maybe 100 12 centers, right? And then you can ask for $200 or $300 for 100 12-cent books. That might be more worth it to certain collectors, right? So there's ways that you could do it. But if you don't want to do any work at all and you just want money for these books, you're going to take less, and you might just have to suck that up and own up to that. That's the fact of the matter. Because I know that there's a lot of people that inherit collections that they don't want to spend any time trying to price these books out. All right, so that leads us into our last mistake of the day. The first mistake that I see people making is not understanding the grade and the condition of the comic book. Your reader copy is not just as valuable as a near mint. I'm going to give you an example. Again, and as you all could probably see that a lot of these mistakes overlap and correlate with each other. I have a 15-cent Submariner. So what was I talking about? The mistake of, all books are valuable. It's a 15-cent book. It's an old book. I bet this is worth dozens of dollars or hundreds of dollars, right? No. But in a high grade, this specific book is worth at least a couple $100 in a near mint, right? But look at this book. This book's a mess. It has a huge rip right there, if you guys can see that. It's got water staining right here. It's got tape all along the spine. It's got a horrible spine roll. It's all beat up. It's color rubbed all throughout the top. And it's got, spine ticks all over the place. I don't even know if that tape is holding in the pages. I mean, this is a beat up reader copy. You got a chunk of the cover coming off right there. So guess how much I paid for this book? $1. Because in this condition, that's as much as it's worth. I could probably press this up and maybe sell it for $3. But again, you got to understand the grade of your book. Just because you have even a key book, you can have Amazing Spider-Man 300. But we know that if it's beat up and it has a rip on the cover, or, it's a very low grade book, it might only be worth $40 or $50, where a mid-grade copy is going to be worth, anywhere from $200 to $400, where a high-grade copy is going to be worth over $1,000. You have to understand with comic books that grades matter. So I know most of us collectors understand that, but if you're just maybe a casual collector, or like I said, somebody that is just getting their hands on some comic books or came into a collection, an inherited collection, these are the things that you're going to want to acknowledge and be educated on. So let's review the 5 mistakes that we talked about today. Sources. When pricing your books, make sure you use more than one resource, whether that's a print resource like Overstreet or an online resource like Cover Price, Go Collect, or Key Collector. All right. Using graded books to judge the value for raw books. Make sure that you're not looking at graded book values. CGC, CBCS, PGX, EGS. Make sure you are not using graded book values for raw books. All right. 3, thinking that all comic books have value. They do not. All right. 4, the more books, the more value. False. Remember, the more you put in to pricing out the books individually, the more you're going to come out. Otherwise, you're going to attract dealers and resellers, all right? And the last one, not understanding the grade and condition. You have to understand the grade and condition. Grade absolutely matters. So, I hope that this video was helpful to you all today. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments below. Again, if you aren't subscribed to the channel, please take some time to do so. Also, guys, if you want to rock some fresh Journos Comics merch and support the channel by doing so, my link to my merchandise store website is below as well. So again, please feel free to help support the channel in any way you can. Thank you all for being here today. Be well, and until next time.